Hey everyone, the 20th century proverb, "It's better to be safe than sorry," is for pussies. I remember hearing this stupid phrase ever since I was a kid. It's better to be safe than sorry. It was pretty much everywhere. It was in all the PSAs during the Saturday morning cartoons. It was in after-school programs, whether it was in the school or on television. It was on posters inside of the schools, and of course, it was spewing out of the teachers' mouths as if they're imparting wisdom to you. And for whatever reason, it always bothered me. It bothered me since the first time I heard this phrase. And in fact, one time I got in trouble in the first grade because I was questioning my teacher about this, and I kept saying it seems to be better to be sorry than it is to be safe. Now, there's no mystery today that young men are losing in many ways, and virtually in every way imaginable. At schools, for example, and universities, much of the education system has been tailored for the feminine mind. So much so that women tend to do better now in schools. More women are graduating in college than men are. And in the professional workforce, after graduating college, these type of employers prefer women over men. And then even more gravely, the Gen Z testosterone levels are significantly lower than previous generations around the same age. You could even just see it in the physical manifestations. If you look at images of an 18-year-old 60, 70 years ago, they already look much older than the 18-year-olds look today. They're having less sex and masturbating more. There's an epidemic of porn addiction, a sedentary lifestyle, and overall, young men are just becoming or are already losers. And although there are many material factors that play a role in this, this decline of masculinity within young men, such as dietary, microplastics, obesity, etc., a major factor that plays a role in the drop of testosterone, drop in masculine virtues amongst these young men, really is the sedentary lifestyle, as well as the anxiety, depression, and the so-called other mental health issues. And it's such an attack on the young men's minds that I think really gets at the heart of it is the lack of risk in their life. And they've been taught this since they were young, right? This modern proverb, "It's better to be safe than sorry," began in my generation, probably even before my generation, but really was heightened in the 80s and the 90s and continued through the generations later. So much so that I've met many 20-year-olds, for example, that already have bought a house even though they have no wife or child. Everything to them is about this life as playing it safe. There has been this strange movement now that you must be adverse to any set of risk. And so there's been countless of research done around the world about high-risk behavior and testosterone levels, high-risk behavior and manhood. And the HSE University, along with the Max Planck Institute of Human Cognitive and Brain Science, for example, research showing brain scans and brain activities with the EEGs that show during an activity of high risk, and I think their test had to do with like 50 boxes, and they told them one of them has a bomb in it or something like that. But you could look it up. You could look up yourself. But when they were doing activities with high risk, there was a significant uptick on the brain scans of the men, while on the women they were much more risk adverse. They didn't want to take as much risk. There's other research that showed that there was a link between brain activities and the hormone activities, especially in testosterone, when the individual is taking a risk. That there's a direct link to testosterone levels and risk behavior. Now again, this is not to say that these other factors are unimportant. It's simply to say that this one factor I think is crucial in terms of the young men suffering from anxiety, young men suffering from depression, that is also linked to the low testosterone levels and how their lifestyle really has shaped their behavior. So there's many more research that anybody could really look up, because this part, at least according to much of the left's narrative really hasn't caught on yet, so they haven't really stifled this research that you could find pretty easily online today. But for the sake of this video, I really want to focus on this idea of risk, because I've met far too many young people that are just afraid of the consequences of risky behavior. And the problem is that risky behavior has always been a very masculine quality. Whether it's risky behavior of doing tricks on a skateboard or on a bike, whether it's risky behavior in terms of investments or starting a business, whether it's risky behavior of getting into a fist fight or whatever it may be, the male has always been pro-risk. And when you eliminate that quality of masculinity, you eliminate a very essential part of what makes a man, and especially what turns a boy into a man. Teaching young men not to take risk and to fear the effects of risk is truly one of the most damaging things you could ever teach a young person. And we're kind of seeing parts of his effect take hold with many of the Gen Zers, even though, again, there's other reasons why I believe these young men are becoming pussies. We have created pussified men by telling them, don't take risks. We have created pussified men by putting porn in front of them. We created pussified men really by eliminating such essential qualities of basic masculinity. And so, playing it safe really does contribute to much of people's anxious attitudes towards towards kind of effects within their life, whether it's the job, whether it is a relationship, whether it's fear of speaking in public, and so far and so forth. There's this idea that playing it safe is a good, but really in the end it isn't, especially not for men. Because the moment that life hits you with something that is tough to deal with, and you have never put yourself in a situation where you have to deal with these negative consequences, of course anxiety is going to build up in your life. Of course you're going to be crippled by this kind of anxiety. Or when things don't turn out the way you want it to, of course you're going to have this mass depression in your life. Playing it safe, in the end, really does make you a coward. It doesn't give you the ability or the tools that is needed to go against adversity or to overcome the consequences of what life will end up throwing at you. Playing it safe for the man in the end makes you a pussy. As young men, you need to take risks. You need adventure. You need to suffer the consequences of risky behavior, whatever that risky behavior may be. Now, the particular risky behaviors can differ between men. Some obviously have higher testosterone, just genetically built that way. They tend to take more risks in life. They tend to do more things in life. But we all, as men, still have the innate characteristic to become somebody who takes more risks. And so I'm not saying that everybody needs to be as insane as I am, for example. Of course, anybody that knows me knows that I don't really give a shit about a lot of the consequences that comes about me. But there is a sense that within your limitations, you should always push it. You should always push what you think you're comfortable with, because it is in your pushing those limitations really when you begin to understand what you are capable of. And so if what you do, if you're like 18 years old and what you're doing in your life right now, you could already see the entire future written out for you and it doesn't scare the shit out of you, then really you're not risking enough. You're being like a woman. Traditionally, women got married young because the feminine mind and the feminine corporeal structure is one that needs to be playing it safe. They do find husbands, older men, for example, traditionally, that has already went through their adventures through their entire life when they were young. And so when you, as a man, are playing it safe and you know what you're going to be doing for the next 30 or 40 years, and you're only 18 years old, it means that you're existing as a woman. If you have not risked anything at that point, you really should start risking things. Because as a young man, you need to act contrary to this playing it safe idea. You need to reject it in principle. No, it is not better to be safe than sorry. As my 5-year-old self said to the teacher, and then again got reprimanded for it, it is always better as a young man to be sorry than safe. I remember once in my Catholic school, a student asked the teacher, "How do I decide what to give up for Lent?" And the teacher responded, when you think of something and the first thing that pops into your head is, "Oh no, I can't give that up," that's the thing you need to give up. Because then you know that's what's difficult. And that kind of stuck with me, right? And I apply that within risk and life itself. When you think to yourself, well, have I been living a life of masculinity enough? Have I been living a life of risk enough? And if the first thing that pops into your head of a risky behavior is, oh no, that is too much, most likely that's a good indication that that's the kind of thing that you need to be risking. Because when you're young and unmarried, you have really nothing to lose. You have no child to support. You have no spouse to support. What are you doing when you're 16, 17, 18 years old? What are you doing if you're not risking and pushing the limits of your behavior? Now, none of this is to say that you need to be doing sinful acts. None of it's to say that you are required to do vicious behavior. But within the confines of moral behavior, there's plenty of risk you could take. There's businesses you could start. There's investments you could do. There's quitting a job that you hate. There's a woman that you could speak to that terrifies you. There's a shooting beyond your league when it comes to talking to women. There's the idea that maybe you can make yourself a millionaire. Maybe you could do whatever. That there is no limit to what you can do. And when you're young, you should be pushing that fucking limit all the time. If not, you are inherently acting as a woman. So taking risks and suffering the consequences of those risks make you stronger. It makes you realize that fearing the unknown or fearing kind of the known possible outcome is kind of stupid. Because once you encounter it, you realize that life still continues. Life goes on. And when you begin to take risks and to begin to deal and overcome with the consequences of those risky behaviors, it is really when you finally find yourself in manhood. You finally find yourself becoming a man and no longer a boy. Now, a long time of listeners, again, of Contra Gentiles understands that I engage in many risky behaviors, and I'm not saying that is as risky as one ought to be. For there's people that have different limits than I do. And there's people that have even greater limits than I do that can overcome even more adversity, that can overcome everything. And so really, when you're young, it should be testing these limits, because it is only then when you begin to realize what are your limits. And you have to begin to just not care, especially when you have no responsibility, not care about inconsequential consequences. Fuck those consequences. Fuck being safe. Just be a man and start acting. All right, well, that's the show for today. Or at least for this segment. For our members, the show will continue. And for non-members, please subscribe either on Patreon or on our website to catch the rest of the show, as well as catching all the rest of the things that Contra Gentiles is offering and will offer in the future. Thank you. See you tomorrow.